Okay, today's video is going to be about how to write the equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. We're going to review how to tell if lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither, review the three types of linear equations, and then we will write the equations of parallel and perpendicular lines. So those are the three topics and the EQ that you need to have down in your notes. So to start, we're going to review parallel, perpendicular, and neither. So if lines are going to be parallel, they're going to have the same slope. So I'm just going to put same slope. And they're going to have different y-intercepts. So the slope of line 1 could be 1/2. The slope of line 2 would also be 1/2. If they're going to be perpendicular, they have slopes that are opposite reciprocals. And what that means is to change the sign and flip the fraction. They could have different or the same y-intercept. So if the slope of line 1 was 2, the slope of line 2, its perpendicular line, would be -1/2. So opposite means change the sign. Reciprocal means flip the fraction. And then neither, that just means they have different slopes. So different slopes. So line 1 could have a slope of 2, and line 2 could have a slope of -2. They have no relationship. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is the types of linear equations. So the first one is point slope form. So in that dashed box, you're going to want to write that down. And then I kind of gave you some information. So this equation right here. And you can see m is the slope, and then we have x1 and y1 is the point that we are using. It's point slope. So we are just going to plug everything in. I'm going to try and color code as I plug things in. So I'm going to start with y minus, and then I'm going to put in y1, which in this case, my y1 is -5. So since it's a -5, that's going to be a +5. And then I'm going to plug in my slope, which in this case is 5. And then x minus my x1, which is 2. Now we're going to take this equation and move it into transformation form. Which is what you may be familiar with from Algebra 1. So all we're going to do is move this 5 over. And I'm going to get this nice equation that says y equals 5 times x minus 2 minus 5. So there's point slope. Now we're going to move on to slope-intercept, probably what we're most comfortable with, y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So that only works when they give you the slope and the y-intercept. So in this case, they gave us the slope as 1/3 and the y-intercept as 7. So I would say y equals the slope, which is 1/3, x, and then plus +7, so +7. So there's my equation. The slope is 1/3 and the y-intercept is 7. Moving right along, we have standard form, which is the last one that we're going to talk about. We have ax plus by equals c. So it looks a little bit different, and a, b, and c cannot be fractions, and then a, the leading coefficient, cannot be negative. So we're going to take this this y equals 3/4 x minus 2, and we're going to rewrite it in standard form. So what I'm going to do first is move my 3/4 x over, so minus 3/4 x minus 3/4 x, and I get this equation minus 3/4 x plus y equals -2. Now, it says that you can't have fractions right here, so I need to clear the fraction, so I'm going to multiply by the denominator, which is 4, and my leading coefficient here is negative, and I can't have a leading coefficient of negative. So I'm actually going to multiply by -4, and I'm going to make sure to distribute that to all 3 of the terms. So negative 4 times negative 3 over 4 is going to give me a positive 3x. Minus 4 times y is going to give me a minus 4y. And then minus 4 times minus 2 is going to give me a positive 8. So there we have it in standard form. We're going to be using all three of those forms to write our other equations. Okay, so now we're going to move on and we're going to take a slope and a point. We're going to write it in point slope, slope intercept, and standard form, just practicing writing the equation of the line. So I'm going to start with the slope, which is 2. I'll fill that in with a color. The slope is 2. And then my x1 is 2 and my y1 is 3. So I'm going to fill that in with slope intercept. So y minus y1, which is 3, equals the slope, which is 2 times x minus x1, which is 2. And before I write it in my box, I'm going to move over the 3 so it's in transformation form. And so I get y equals 2 times x minus 2 plus 3. And so I have y equals 2 times x minus 2 plus 3. Now I'm going to move on and write it in slope intercept. So all I'm going to do, I've changed colors. I'm going to keep my equation right here, and I'm going to distribute my 2 into my parentheses so I can get it into slope intercept. So that would be y equals 2x minus 4 plus 3. So I get y equals 2x minus 1. So I'm going to put that in my box. Y equals 2x minus 1. And now I'm going to move on to writing it in standard form. So I'm going to move my 2x over. I get minus 2x plus y equals negative 1. And I'm going to multiply everything by negative 1 because my leading coefficient cannot be negative. So I get 2x minus y equals 1. So 2x minus y equals 1 as my standard form. So that's kind of how you go from point slope to slope intercept to standard. So now we're going to do that and write it parallel to whatever is given to us. So our line that's given to us is y equals 3x plus 7. So the given slope is 3. The given slope is 3. And since the lines are going to be parallel, the parallel slope is also going to be 3. And then the point that they gave us is 3, 2. So I'm going to be using this information in red to write my equation in point slope, write my equation in slope intercept, and then write my equation in standard. So I'm going to start with point slope, and I'm just going to plug it into the equation. So y minus my y value, which is 2, equals the slope, which is 3 times x minus x1, so 3. So there it is in point slope. I am going to move the 2 over so it's in transformation form, and I get y equals 3 times x minus 3 plus 2. So there it is in point slope. Now I'm going to distribute the 3 and write it in slope intercept. So for slope intercept, I'm going to take my y equals 3 times x minus 3 plus 2, and I'm going to distribute the 3, so y equals 3x minus 9 plus 2, and minus 9 plus 2 is going to give me y equals 3x minus 7. And then I'm going to take it one step further, and I'm going to move on to standard, and I'm just going to move over here to the left. Standard form, which, remember, no fractions and no negative leading coefficient. So I'm going to take my y equals 3x minus 7, and I'm going to move the 3x over. And so I get minus 3x plus y equals negative 7, but since I have a negative 3, I need to multiply the entire equation by negative 1. So remember, that's all 3 parts by negative 1. So I get a 3x minus y equals positive 7 as my standard form. So that was writing parallel in the 3 different forms. We're going to move on to perpendicular next. So the next one says, write the equation of the line perpendicular to the given one passing through this point. So before we can start, we need to identify the slope. I don't know what the given slope is because I was given my equation in standard form. So 3x plus 2y equals 7. I need it to be in slope-intercept form so I can identify the slope. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides, and I get 2y equals minus 3x plus 7. Divide by 2 so I can get y by itself. So y equals minus 3 over 2x plus 7 over 2. So the given slope here is minus 3 over 2. Now, we want to write perpendicular, so I'm going to use this little upside down t, which means perpendicular. So the perpendicular slope needs to be the opposite reciprocal. So since this slope is negative, we need a positive, and since this is 3 over 2, we're going to do the reciprocal, which is 2 over 3. So the perpendicular slope is going to be 2 over 3, and then they gave us the point, which was 3, 2. So I'm going to start with this information here in red, and I'm going to start by writing it in point slope. So I'm just going to take my information and plug it in. So y minus the y value, which is 2, equals the slope 2/3 times x minus the x value, which is 3. And again, I'm going to move this 2 over so it is in transformation form. So I get y equals 2/3 x minus 3 plus 2 in point slope. I'm going to distribute the fraction, the 2/3, to get it into slope-intercept. So I'm going to distribute, I'll rewrite it here, 2/3 x minus 3 plus 2. So I'm going to distribute the 2/3, and I get y equals 2/3 x minus 2 times 3 is 6 divided by 3, so that makes it 2, plus 2, so minus 2 plus 2. So y equals 2/3 x is going to be our answer in slope-intercept. And then I'm going to move the x over to the left side of the equal sign to put it in standard. So I'm going to take my y equals 2/3 x and I'm going to move it over. And I get minus 2/3 x plus y equals 0. Now, I can't have a fraction and I cannot have a negative as the leading coefficient. So I need to multiply this entire thing by a negative 3. So I'm going to get a 2x minus 3y equals 0. It's my standard form. Okay, and so that's the end of this video, going from point slope, slope-intercept, and standard, writing perpendicular and parallel lines.